Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Playtech TV. My name is Kevin, and today we have a very special video for you. It's the MSI GT80 Titan, an absolute beast of a gaming notebook that is pretty much the definition of desktop replacement. So let's get into it and see how it performs. So let's start with the exterior, and it's absolutely massive. There is no two ways about it. It's coming in at 456 by 330 by 49 millimeters and weighing in at 4.5 kilograms with the battery in, which actually isn't that bad. Now it's a dark mix of brushed aluminium and plastic that we've seen before, but I still think looks really good. It also has red accents all over, which gives it a sexy, distinct look. The chrome MSI logos also look good, and it has a light up dragon on the back, which I also think looks really good. The transition between the aluminium and the plastic could be better though. You can really tell the difference between them. But it makes up for this by having a huge dragon just above the keyboard that looks really awesome. Moving on now to I/O, and it has absolutely nothing in the front. Then when we look over to the left hand side, we see that it has a combo audio and mic jack, a SPDIF, which is a Sony/Philips digital interface format port, 3 USB 3.0 ports, including one for charging, a multi-card reader, a Blu-ray read and write drive, and a secure lock. Then when we move round to the rear, we see that it has a Ethernet port, the AC input for its massive 330 watt power supply, that's about the size of an external hard drive, HDMI port, and twin mini display ports. And then finally on the right hand side we see that it just has another 2 USB 3.0 ports. Moving on now to the specs of this absolute beast of a gaming notebook, and it features the Intel i7-4980HQ as its CPU. That's a quad-core 22nm Haswell CPU with hyperthreading, 2.4 GHz base clock, but it'll boost all the way up to 4 GHz. Now the chipset is an Intel Shark Bay HM87. GPUs, this is where it gets crazy. NVIDIA GeForce GTX980M SLI. That gives you a total of 8 GB of video memory. Now as far as RAM goes, you're getting an also overkill amount of 32 GB, that's 4 times 8 GB kits of 1600 MHz DDR3. Now storage, you're getting 4 256 GB M.2 SSDs in RAID 3 for a total of 1024 GB of SSD storage. And to complement that, you'll also get 1 TB of 7200 RPM hard disk drive storage. Now, it also has Bluetooth 4.0 connectivity, killer double shot wireless 802.11ac. The operating system is Windows 8.1, and it comes with a 2-year MSI pickup and return warranty. Next, let's talk about the display, what you're going to be looking at the majority of the time you're using this absolute beast of a gaming notebook. So, it's an 18.4-inch LCD anti-glare 1080p panel. Now that's a great size for playing games and watching movies and videos. It has very little glare, and the viewing angles were surprisingly good, so multiple people could be watching a movie or video with no worries at all. Now it's just a bit bizarre to me that they use such a standard display on such an extravagant gaming notebook. It's just a 1080p 60Hz panel like you get on many others. I think it would have been better if they maybe put a 1440p or 3K display on it, just to make it as crazy as everything else is with this gaming notebook. With that being said though, this is probably the best 1080p display that I've ever seen on a laptop. The color reproduction is fantastic. It's very sharp and the response is phenomenal. So it is still an incredible 1080p display. Sound is handled by Dynaudio, and it does come with a subwoofer. It supports 7.1 channel SPDIF output. It also has their exclusive audio boost technology, Creative Sound Blaster Cinema, which I'll be talking about a bit later. And all that translates into the best sounding laptop I have ever heard. It is just fantastic. No matter if you're watching a movie or playing a game or listening to music, the audio quality is absolutely fantastic. It can also go very loud. I never actually took it above 30%, and even that was getting pretty loud. So you're never going to run out of audio volume with this laptop. Let's talk now about one of the most standout features about this gaming notebook, the keyboard. So it's a fully mechanical keyboard by SteelSeries featuring Cherry MX brown switches with red backlighting. Now the layout is pretty standard, with the main function keys that you use, the brightness keys and the volume keys, down on the arrow keys, which I really like. It also has 3 other buttons up the top, a fan button which switches the fans to 100% on mode if you're playing a really intense game. That'll help bring the temperatures down. A GPU button which switches the GPU between the dedicated graphics and the integrated graphics, and of course the power button. Now this is the absolute best keyboard I have ever used on a laptop, period. It is just absolutely fantastic. It's just like using a normal Cherry MX mechanical keyboard like one you would use with your normal desktop computer. There is no difference at all. The only thing I have to say is that if you're using this on your lap, which you're probably not going to be using, there's no wrist rest because the keyboard's right at the back of the notebook. So that can be a bit of an issue if you're trying to play games with it on your lap or type with it on your lap. But if you're just using it on a table or a desk like normal, then it's absolutely fantastic. A+, the best one I have ever used. Now moving over to the right hand side of the keyboard, you'll find the touchpad, which is in a portrait mode rather than the more standard landscape layout. It also has a full numpad which you can bring up just by hitting the top left corner, which is really cool and I think looks absolutely fantastic. Now being off to the side takes a while to get used to, and overall it doesn't seem too different, and at least it doesn't get in the way when you're trying to type. However, it's still one of the worst touchpads I have ever used. The size and shape just don't work, and it's just very hard to scroll around the screen. The sensitivity also feels quite off, and the material feels too sticky and your finger kind of sticks when trying to move around on it. Gestures are also quite hard to use, although the buttons are okay. But that doesn't really matter that much because most people are going to be using a mouse with this anyway and just be leaving this in its num mode on with all the numbers up. So it's not really that big of an issue, especially if you're just going to be gaming on it because you're just going to be using a mouse anyway. As far as webcams go, it's pretty standard, 30 frames per second, 1080p, going to do all your Skype needs really, really well. But now let's talk about performance, what most of you came here to see. So with the SSDs, it means the operating system loads up super fast, everything's really snappy, there are no load times at all, really good. But now let's get to the benchmarks and start with the CPU. So to test it, I did the benchmark within Intel Extreme Tuning Utility, and it scored 694 marks, which is a really decent effort. Now let's see what the GPUs can do. So first up, I did Unigine Valley on the Extreme HD preset, and it scored an average of 72.1 frames per second, which is really, really good, very impressive. Next was Unigine Heaven 4.0. This is DirectX 11, everything maxed out, 1080p. And it scored 80.6 frames per second average, another amazing result. Lastly, I did Heaven again, everything maxed out, 1080p, this time in OpenGL, and it scored 75.6 frames per second. So these benchmarks are really high. They're higher than my personal rig I have at home, my desktop rig. So it's just absolutely crazy, really high performance. As far as how that performance translates into gaming terms, I played all my 1080p games, everything maxed out on it, and it handled them no worries. Whatever I threw at it, it could just handle. It was unbelievable how powerful this is. So it's going to be able to do all your 1080p games absolutely maxed out, no worries at all. It's just going to plow through everything. Now, as far as heat goes, it did get quite toasty. So we'll start with the CPU. So during the Intel Extreme Tuning Utility benchmark, it went all the way up to 77 degrees Celsius, which is quite hot, but it's nowhere near its thermal limit and it wasn't throttling at all. Now as far as the GPUs went, during the Unigine Valley Extreme HD benchmark, they went up to 78 degrees Celsius and 72 degrees Celsius, which again is quite hot, but nowhere near the thermal limits, so it's not really that bad and you won't see any throttling at all. If you press the fan button, which makes the fans go at 100%, then that'll drop them down to 71 degrees Celsius and 61 degrees Celsius. However, to noise, that does increase the noise heaps. With the fans on 100%, it is incredibly noisy. But even with them off, when you're playing a game, it still gets quite loud. The fans are probably going at about 70% anyway, so yeah, it does really get quite loud. You're going to want to turn the volume right up or wear some good gaming headphones because it will be quite loud. But considering the components it's packing and the heat it's outputting, it's not really too bad. If you're going to be doing more casual things like browsing the web and watching videos, then you're going to want to switch over to the integrated graphics. And with doing that sort of thing, you're probably going to see battery life in the neighborhood of 3.5 hours to 4 hours. However, if you're going to be gaming, you're going to obviously want to switch back to the dedicated graphics, and then battery life is probably going to be around 2 hours, you know, depending on the type of games you're playing, depending on how you have battery boost set as well. But yeah, it's about 2 hours for gaming with the dedicated graphics and about 3.5 to 4 hours with just more casual use on the integrated graphics. Now, as far as software goes, it comes with Windows 8.1 as its operating system. It has a Norton trial, MSI Killer Network Manager, which is actually quite useful for some people, Sound Blaster Cinema 2, which means you're going to be able to set up the audio exactly how you want it, System Control Manager, which is okay, I suppose, but MSI Dragon Gaming Center was the one I found very useful. It's really cool. It shows you good information such as the power, the performance, temperatures and network information, and I thought it was a great addition and I really liked using it. So in conclusion, design wise, it is absolutely massive and it is quite heavy, but I think it looks absolutely badass. It has really nice red accent, it has a big dragon, and the lighting looks fantastic. Now, the display was really good. However, with the rest of the specs being this high end, I would expect a higher resolution panel. But this 1080p display was fantastic, so I can't really complain too much. Sound was phenomenal, very strong, very full. It was able to go seriously loud. I just can't complain. It was really, really good. Now, the keyboard is the best I've ever used on a laptop, bar none. Being a mechanical keyboard, it felt fantastic. It was really good to use, really good for typing. However, the lack of a wrist rest might be annoying for some people when you're using it on your lap. Now, the touchpad really does need some improvement. Being able to switch over to a numpad was really cool, but just the size and shape just weren't that good. It was quite hard to use, gestures were difficult, and overall I didn't think it was that good. But most people are probably just going to be using a mouse with this anyway, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Performance is absolutely insane. 1080p gaming, maxed out all day, whatever the game. It's just going to breeze through everything. And the benchmarks were absolutely jaw-dropping, so really impressive performance. Heat-wise, it did get quite toasty, which is to be expected. And it does get quite hot, but it's still within its thermal limits. Nothing was throttling, so it really shouldn't be an issue, and you can still just hit that fan button and ramp the fans up a lot if you want to bring the temperatures down. Noise-wise though, it is pretty noisy, especially when you're gaming. It does ramp up a lot. With casual use, it's completely silent, but when you're gaming, yeah, it can be quite noisy, so you are going to have to turn your game volume up or wear some headphones. Now, battery life was pretty decent on the integrated graphics. So with casual use, as I said, you'll get about 3.5 to 4 hours depending on your use, maybe a little bit more. However, when you're on the dedicated graphics playing games, it's probably going to drop down quite substantially. And software was pretty standard aside from the MSI Dragon Gaming Center, which was actually really good to use and really handy, and I really quite liked it. And that's going to round out this video. So leave a like if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to Playtech TV, and as always, I'll see you guys next time.